friends, my name's Katie. Welcome back to my channel, Life Between Words. Welcome if you're new, welcome if you're old. Not old, but you know, old to my channel, which it can't be that old because my channel's not that old itself. Anyway, it is the beginning of December. It finally feels a little colder, although not as cold as December usually is in Wisconsin. We have not had snow yet. I'm actually hoping for a little snow, although not a ton of snow, and ice because my center of gravity is starting to get a little unbalanced due to my being 32 weeks pregnant, and I prefer that we held off on the ice just so that I don't trip and fall and hurt myself. Anyway, let's get down to what this video is all about, and that is what I read in the month of November. The first book I read was Cold Mountain by Charles Frazier. This started out as a buddy read with Kate Howe, but Kate DNF'd it, which is fine. She just decided that this was not the book that she wanted to read right now, but I kept going with it because I love this book. It is a very quiet book, very, very quiet and very character-driven, sort of Odyssey-esque. This book tells the story of Inman and Ada. It takes place during the Civil War. Inman is a Confederate soldier who decides to defect and find his way back home to Ada, who was his pre-war sweetheart. Ada, meanwhile, is left at home on her farm after her father dies and doesn't know how to take care of herself, but doesn't want to move into town and have other people take care of her. She wants to learn independence. She runs into a woman named Ruby who comes and joins her on the farm and sort of teaches her how to survive. If you've ever seen the movie of Cold Mountain, it feels more like a romance, perhaps, maybe? I don't know, it's been a while since I've seen the movie. I could be wrong about that, but I feel like the movie feels pretty romantic. And when I read this in high school, it felt very romantic to me. I feel like when you're in high school, you sort of attach yourself to anything that's even remotely romantic. Or at least I did. I don't think everyone's like that, but I did that. And when I was in high school, I attached myself to Inman and Ada's romantic journey. It really is more a philosophical journey for Inman and Ada as they journey back to find each other. It's really tragic. It's very quiet. It's a soft, quiet book. I shouldn't say soft because there are a lot of moments in the book that are really hard-hitting, and not just hard-hitting, but hard to read. There's violence. It's not necessarily an easy book to read in some places, and it's beautifully, beautifully written. So if that sounds like something that's up your alley, I do recommend it, but just know going into it that it is not a page-turner necessarily. It's really quiet. Next, for nonfiction November, I picked up Between Parent and Child by Haim Ginott. This is a classic parenting book. It was written, I think, first in the 60s. Let me just make sure about that. Yeah, it was written in 1965, although it was updated in 2003, and so it is, you know, you can read it as a modern parent and get a lot out of it, and I did. Although I will say, I went into this book expecting a lot more practical advice in terms of how to navigate difficult situations from beginning to end. This book did not talk a lot about discipline, but it did talk a lot about how to communicate healthily with your child and productively with your child. And for that, I really, really appreciated this book. But I didn't get a lot of practical advice in terms of how do I discipline Fox? Like, what's an appropriate discipline for different situations, and how do I see conflict with him from start to finish? That was my one complaint with this book, but I did get a lot out of it, and as you can see, I marked it up a lot, so I will be returning. And there was even a section in here about introducing your new baby to your old baby. So that I will definitely be returning to even within the next month, because in about a month and a half, I'm going to have another baby. So there you go. The next book I finished was Girl Waits with Gun, which I listened to as an audiobook and really, really loved it. It was so much fun. It was historical fiction about a real person, one of the first female sheriffs in the country, or the first female sheriff in the country, I don't know, one or the other. It takes place in New Jersey. It's kind of a mystery. It's about the Kopp sisters. Constance Kopp is the main character, but her two sisters, and now I'm going to forget their names, so forgive me, but she has two sisters, and they are living on their own on a farm, and they find themselves embroiled with this sort of big city hooligan and trying to get themselves out of that situation. They involve the sheriff's department, and that's kind of how Constance gets her start. Here's the criticism I will say of the book. I felt like it was pretty repetitive, and I don't know if I had read it versus listened to it, whether I would have felt that as much, but the situation does not resolve quickly with this man. And because of that, it feels a little bit circular, but at the same time, the plot does move forward. I loved the audiobook narration. I really, really liked it. I do recommend it if you're a fan of mystery, or if you're a fan of historical fiction, or even if you're just a fan of a strong female lead. Then, for basically the rest of the month, I finished it. Here's what I have to say about it. It took me forever to read. Every time I picked up the book, I really enjoyed it. I thought the writing was fantastic. There are not many other authors other than Stephen King, I feel like, who can write a 1,400-page tome and keep the reader's interest the whole time. I was never bored while reading it, even though I did put it down and pick it up a lot, sort of incrementally. That really had more to do with the fact that I was so burnt out of this genre, and really not a whole lot to do with the writing or the story itself. The story was great. I read a book last year called Summer of Night by Dan Simmons, which takes its lead from it, and that book felt so nostalgic for childhood and friendship and summertime, and it was much the same in it. The story is told from the perspectives of a group of characters when they're kids and then also when they're adults. And when they're kids, you feel nostalgic for childhood, even though the circumstances that they're in are otherworldly and not something that you can totally relate to, other than the fact that they have big imaginations, and that is what the monster kind of feeds off of. So as I become more familiar with horror, I keep expecting to be really scared because I am kind of a scaredy cat. But I was never actually scared while I read this book. Maybe a couple times. I was more on the edge of my seat. I found it intense, and I found it riveting, and I found it uncomfortable at times, but I never really found it very scary. However, Stephen King does not shy away from things that make you squirm. They make you uncomfortable. They sometimes make you sick to your stomach. It can be really, really hard to read. There were a couple scenes in this book where I actually had to put the book down for a while because it just made me so uncomfortable reading it. In these scenes in which terrible things happen, Stephen King doesn't keep short to make you feel better. He will draw them out to make you squirm for as long as possible. There was one scene that was like 2 or 3 pages long that I, as a mother, had a really, really, really hard time reading. There was another scene towards the end of the book, towards the very, very end, that I have since heard and found out is a pretty much universally hated scene among Stephen King fans. I'm not going to say what it is, but I will say that it didn't do anything to move the story forward. I felt like it was completely unnecessary, and I just really didn't like it. I thought it was entirely inappropriate, and I didn't understand the point of it. If any of you know what I'm talking about and have some insight and felt differently than me about that scene, please, I'd love to talk with you in the comments, because I just don't get it. Like, I don't understand why it was there. It feels weird to say that that one scene felt so gratuitous, because horror as a genre in general is pretty gratuitous. But yeah, that scene just, it was really over the top in my humble opinion. Because of that one scene, I took a whole star off the book, which may be ridiculous, but that's how much I hated it. But having said all that, this was an amazingly well-crafted, well-written, well-told horror story. I'm so glad that I read it. It explored really interesting themes of childhood and imagination and facing your fears and even power and what that means and how you gain it, how you lose it, all that kind of stuff. It was very, very good. And then finally this month, I read Bill Bryson's A Road to Little Dribbling. This is Bill Bryson's follow-up to a book he wrote 20 years ago called Notes from a Small Island, which is one of my favorite travel books that Bill Bryson wrote. So it's been 20 years, and Bill Bryson is now a little older than my parents, so probably in his mid-60s. I feel like in the last 20 years, Bill Bryson has gotten a lot grumpier. Whereas at one time I felt like he benevolently commented on people's quirks and had hilarious interactions with them, He spends a lot more time now griping about people's deficiencies and stupidity, and is just not very gracious in his interactions with people, and will resort to cussing them out, at least in his head and now on the pages of this book. And in fact, he just spends a lot less time even mentioning the funny interactions he has with people, and a lot more time commenting on the beauty of his surroundings, which, if you know Bill Bryson, he spends a lot of time doing that in general, and I love that. I just missed some of those interactions. But Bill Bryson could write about concrete drying, and I'd still think it was fascinating, and I'd still want to read it. He is still hilarious. This book still made me laugh out loud in so many places. So it's not at all that I disliked this book. I really liked this book. I just didn't like it as much as I like some of his other books, if that makes sense. I would love to know what you guys read this month. I would love to know what you think about what I read. I would love to know what you're looking forward to in December, whether or not you celebrate Christmas. And I guess that's all. I'll talk to you all later. Oh, hi, Peaches. I'll talk to you all later. Bye. November was a really hard month for so many reasons. Personally, we had a medical emergency in my family that took up a lot of my time and energy emotionally and physically, and I'm very happy to say goodbye to November, apart from just the stuff that was going on a more national world scale. So yeah, I'm ready for December. I'm ready for the Christmas season. I love Christmas so much. It makes my heart so happy. I don't want your butt in my head. Face. Head. Come on, Peaches. No butts on faces. No butts on faces. Okay?